All 4 emperors are officially in the race to become the Pirate King, and this is Buggy's finest hour. He is no longer a joke. For the first time in this series, Buggy is driven. Driven enough to stand up to both Crocodile and Mihawk and drag them into the greatest conflict that this world has ever seen. I was genuinely moved by Buggy in this chapter, because he's always been a character I've appreciated, albeit mostly for meme status, because I have a big bias towards the more wacky aspects of One Piece. But I think this is the first time that I've had a genuine sense of respect for Buggy. I'm not exaggerating at all when I say that this chapter has completely changed him as a character. What began as a very persistent court jester, failing upwards for our entertainment, has turned into a heartfelt pursuit of dreams, which is so perfectly in line with the core themes of One Piece. In fact, we get to see every side of Buggy in this chapter. The snake oil salesman putting on a deceiving show, the wacky comedy clown with the ship is amazing, but also a legitimately heartfelt flashback and a sense of very uncharacteristic bravery, as well as the Luffy-level drive to become the Pirate King. But to open up, I absolutely love that the majority of the scene takes place with Buggy's head hanging on a hook like a household pot plant. It's such a morbid yet hilarious and efficient method of Buggy storage. But what's happening in this scene is so much darker than I originally thought. Because when you go back and look at these panels, there's some pretty disturbing devices in this room. Like the throne of spikes, the stocks, the rack in the background, and all sorts of other medieval torture devices that tell us that Buggy has had a more harrowing experience than I initially suspected. And I guess putting aside the logistics of exactly how these devices actually work, given Buggy's fruit powers, that aside, I think this adds a ton to his big moments, specifically in that hammering home that Buggy has been broken. His shell of lies has been shattered, his body quite literally taken away from him, and all Buggy has left are his dreams and desires. So what does he do when all else is taken away? Well, he surprisingly, despite the lack of feet, steps up, and despite the lack of hands, claps back at Mihawk and Crocodile, which was so unbelievably satisfying. And let's be real, Mr. Buggy has more leverage than I think even he's aware of, because Crocodile and Mihawk need him. They can't convince Buggy's crew to betray him and follow them instead. They are just far too loyal for that kind of thing. And when you think about it, it is kind of pathetic, really. All Crocodile can do is physically torture Buggy. He can't threaten Buggy's life because he needs that life. So if Buggy can endure the pain like he has been, then he's in complete control here. Which is why I loved it when he lectured Sir Crocodile and Dracul Mihawk about what it means to be a pirate, and the idea that the pursuit of wealth and power are secondary factors. Because as I've noted previously, Cross Guild actually have the perfect formula for Pirate King. Crocodile brings the wealth, Mihawk brings the power, and Buggy brings the fame. These 3 odd gentlemen in their odd alliance could be nigh on unstoppable. And the fact that Crocodile and Mihawk have no comeback to Buggy shows that his words hurt them far more than any torture they could possibly inflict on him. They basically said the equivalent of, "Oh yeah, well you're just a stupid clown." And I can't get over that. The idea that Buggy the Clown just took Mihawk to pirate school. And that isn't even his finest moment here. In fact, it's not even the second best. Because this flashback was something I don't think I ever expected to see of Buggy. To think that after all of these years, Oda would deliver a solid, heartfelt explanation for why Buggy refused to join Shanks on that day. It's a thing that's never really made sense, but also because the thing has to do with Buggy, it's not really been necessary for us to linger on. But this is tragic. One of the panels in this chapter that hit me hardest was the one where Roger was patting Shanks on the head with Buggy watching in the background. It's so sad that this is the identified moment where Buggy gave up on his dreams, but also not completely gave up. It's more like a Zoro situation where Buggy became willing to sacrifice his dream to make sure that Shanks achieved his. Also, a bit of wild speculation here, but what if this is the moment where Roger gave Shanks his straw hat? And that's why it had this effect on Buggy. Because with the hat, Shanks then became the clear inheritor of Roger's will. Although regardless of exactly when and how that happened, this does take us back to Orangetown. Because this explains why Buggy was so irrationally hateful of Luffy and Shanks, because seeing that straw hat on the head of Luffy likely reinforced the idea that Shanks had given up on following in Roger's footsteps, because he gave away his captain's straw hat. And to who? Just to some guy. Some guy who then went on to kick him in the balls. So what are you doing, Shanks? This is not on. Although I think the craziest part is that yes, there is a world where Buggy would have joined Shanks' crew. And really, if anything, this is all just a soap opera-esque miscommunication, because Shanks didn't immediately state the desire to go to Laugh Tale and become the next Pirate King, Buggy ran away in a fit of betrayal, believing that there was no hope and eventually settling for his mediocre life as an East Blue pirate, gradually becoming more and more jaded until he turns into the Buggy that we meet at the beginning of the series. And then over the course of One Piece, Buggy has been dragged kicking and screaming back towards his dream. And I mean, there is so much in this chapter that makes me feel things that I never thought I'd feel for Buggy, and I am a big Buggy fan. And part of the subtle brilliance of this flashback is that both Crocodile and Mihawk were there when this took place, potentially mere meters away from Shanks and Buggy. So it hits them hard because it makes them think back to Roger's execution and the desire it spawned. With Crocodile in particular because he did just flat out want to become the Pirate King. And all of this culminates in one panel where Buggy tearfully declares that he wants to become the Pirate King, which I think initially hits me really hard because it's very evocative of Robin's I Want to Live panel. And you know, they're in very similar situations actually. Robin was captured by overwhelming power and had absolutely nothing left except a dream and a desire. And now Buggy, in the most pathetic state possible, states his desire to do the most impossible thing in this world. It's powerful, I love it. And it makes me think that, you know, yeah, Buggy could do this. He could become the Pirate King. There's also something really profound in that Buggy understands what stirs the heart of each and every person who makes that decision to become a pirate. And with that, I think we finally discovered something that Buggy did inherit from Roger, because he goes on to make this incredibly stirring speech, reigniting the hopes and dreams of his crew. And you know what? It may very well be the third greatest speech in pirating history, because this sort of thing has only really happened a couple of times before. Once when Roger started the Great Age of Piracy, and once when Whitebeard claimed that the One Piece exists. Plus, not only is Buggy thinking bigger than Crocodile and Mihawk, he's also thinking smarter, identifying that becoming the Pirate King isn't about fight battling your way to the top. When all is said and done, it is a race to find the treasure. And honestly, I think I am riding a bit too high on Buggy hype right now, but he gives me serious Luffy vibes. Whenever Luffy says that he is going to become the Pirate King, I believe him. But also here, when Buggy says all of the things he says in this chapter, I believe him as well. I think he can do it. I legitimately think he could. Laugh Tale could appropriately be found by a clown. Meanwhile, the reactions of Crocodile and Mihawk are absolute gold. Crocodile is fuming. He is beyond furious because he knows that there is no going back from this. In fact, he almost certainly understands the situation better than Buggy does. And from here, Crocodile has two options, neither of which are good. He can either go on to try and claim the One Piece, or he can leave Cross-Guild. The second of which would not be prudent because of how heavily financially invested he is. But the reaction that fascinates me more is Mihawk, because he's not so much angry as he is fearful. As the representative of power, Mihawk understands exactly what it is to come into conflict with figures like Shanks. And what Buggy has essentially done here is commit Mihawk to not only fighting Shanks, but two other emperors as well, which is exactly the thing that Mihawk did not want to do. He just wants to live peacefully and be left alone, but now he's going to be targeted by the Marines and 3 of the 4 emperors. And also from Mihawk's perspective, he's not exactly in the best company to be taking these fights, given that Crocodile and Buggy have both lost to the Straw Hats in the past. I guess more notably Crocodile than Buggy, but Mihawk is assessing the situation here as a one-man army. With that said, I couldn't help but get shivers when Mihawk mentioned the Straw Hats, alongside the Red Hair Pirates and the Blackbeard Pirates, effectively equalizing them. And in my mind, I have a bit of a wacky headcanon where Mihawk is just thinking, wait, you want me to fight Roanoa Zoro? No. Sort of like what he did with Shanks at Marineford, the whole, nope, I didn't sign up for that. But this does actually bring Zoro's dream finally into focus. With Cross-Guild making a genuine play for Pirate King, a time may come when Mihawk stands in the way of Luffy's dream, and the only way to ensure that his captain becomes Pirate King is for Zoro to finally face Mihawk and achieve his dream, like a 2-for-1 dream deal. Oh, and speaking of dreams, I have to linger on Buggy's new ship for a second because it may very well be my favorite ship in the entire series. I love the chibi Buggy figurehead, as well as the intricate circus theming of the entire vessel. It's so detailed, it looks grand and powerful and just like a big flex, a big ol' flex. Sort of like the Queen Mama Chanter, a ship that was so excessively large and detailed that it projected the wealth, fame, and power of Big Mom through design alone. It's glorious, just glorious. But for now, also, we have a big shock. The first page of this chapter completely floored me by announcing the death of Vice Admiral TBone, who actually, last I recall hearing, was only a Rear Admiral. I think it was the SBS of Volume 98 that stated his rank as Rear Admiral. So I don't know if he was promoted, or if this is a translation issue, or if this is a consistency issue. Or if it's even an issue, I don't think anyone but me cares. But I did find this very sad because I have a lot of nostalgia for good old TBone. As far as Marines go, he is about as pure good as one can get. Which actually leads me to this idea. There is no way that the civilian we saw was capable of bringing down TBone. So I think that one of two things happened. One is that TBone faked his death to help the starving family, and the other is that TBone actually allowed himself to be killed so that the family could claim his bounty. Because if you don't remember TBone, that's just the kind of guy he is. He was ready and willing, honestly a bit too willing, to sacrifice himself in order to preserve life, just any kind of life. TBone's motto was 100 good deeds a day, he detested violence, and he was also a vegan. So I could definitely see him doing this. And perhaps that's why the old man dude guy was so sad having claimed the bounty, because he knew that he had just robbed this world of a legitimately good person. However, it was the only thing he could do to save his family. Tragic. And now, let's talk about Sengoku. He has dialogue in this chapter that really is more for the readers than the actual character. The whole part where he says, what is this world coming to? Because Sengoku knows exactly what this world is all about. But it's an invitation for Suru to remind the readers of exactly what the world government is. The fact that half of its nations are composed of starving people in poverty because they pay 99% of their GDP in tax to the world nobles. Sengoku knows that. He is not that out of touch. But we need to really hammer home that we now live in something of a free market bounty economy. And in a way, the world government is starting to reap what they've sown. And to add another glorious Buggy moment, Suru even gives him credit for this system and just how effectively it threatens to destabilize the Marines, thus spreading the legacy of Buggy even further and even higher up the ranks. Really, it's genius on a whole nother level though, because people who claim the Marine bounties then become wanted criminals by the Marines, which means that these bounty hunters have little to no option except to then go on to join Buggy's crew. So he's not only getting rid of his enemies, he is also recruiting people. And these crew members have a great sense of loyalty because Buggy has provided them with opportunities to do stuff like, feed their starving families. And really, it's almost like joining an alternative revolutionary army, a more circus-themed army. And speaking of, Mr. Sabo is back. I don't think anyone actually believed that he would be dead, but he has extremely important world-shaking information from the Reverie, and we'll be diving into all of that in the next video.